gone are the days where we as a vendor can show up.
By the way, it's super hilarious right now, and I love doing this podcast format so we can be real. I hope the microphones are actually picking this up.
The dial tone.
There's a fax machine going off in the background here, so I can't believe people are still using a fax.
It's not
While
even.
we're
It's
talking
not even
about
Throwback
the
Thursday. So
experience economy.
it's not a millennial playing on Instagram. It's an actual fax machine.
Okay. Hi, everybody, and welcome to Subscribe, the Software AG podcast. And we've got a super special episode this month.
Yes, we do.
Normally, we record this podcast for our internal change, but it's a total takeover this month. And with me today, I've got Nick Borth. How's it going, Nick?
Good. How are you, Andrew?
I'm very good. My name is Andrew Cutler. This is actually going outside the walls of Software AG, Nick, for the first time, this whole podcast thing.
Yeah, partner invasion.
So we're taking this outside to one of our great partners, Freshworks, and they've given us the really cool opportunity to talk a bit about Humanizing IT for their Experience IT virtual event. You know all about virtual events being in product marketing, right, Nick? We do our own ones.
We do.
So happy to support another vendor in what they do.
Absolutely.
So it's cool today to talk about it because it really ties into the change that we talk about on our podcast Inside Software AG, right? It's about our shift to subscription and all of the change associated with the experience economy, I suppose, looking at it from the other side of the fence as well, to the way that our customers see us. So we can talk a bit about that today. But maybe just to kick things off, if we start super high in this whole shift in the experience economy and the associated impacts, it's causing kind of a cultural mindset shift out there. So, I mean, what do you think about this from that perspective?
Yeah, I mean it's interesting, right? So the guidance that we got in doing this podcast was around humanizing IT, and
Right.
Me being in marketing and with a lot of the work we're doing around Software AG's brand, it fit really well with our thoughts around us living in a world of living connections. I think what we're seeing, and it goes without saying for most people, especially here in the Valley, is that technology is pervasive and it's become a part of our human existence. And so when you look at the experience economy, often it kind of intersects all the different elements of your day-to-day life, and looking at it from a lens of how does technology influence the way that you're picking up your coffee, the way that you're entering your PTO, the way that you're tracking hours, the way that you're interacting with your caregiver, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And so we as a platform vendor, I think, are contributing to that cultural shift, both in the sense of giving tooling, but also I think we have a responsibility to kind of contribute to it from a cultural sense as well, because we're enabling ultimately the delivery of a lot of these solutions.
Yeah, I think the funny thing to think about sometimes, if you zoom it right out, is not to try and give away anything about our ages, of course, but it's like even just thinking a bit about it from the practical perspective that IT used to be this thing that was super privileged, super high bar of entry to get into, but now, I mean, certainly my kids are born with technology and they just take it for granted. So the things that we're used to making mission critical platforms, of course, a lot of it's very close to infrastructure. In fact, our integration stuff and IoT solutions, and but that making that mission critical is kind of obvious, but then making, like you said, if you expect to be able to order an Uber on your phone, these days digital natives expect that to be mission critical as well. Like they don't want to accept a second of downtime.
Right.
And all of that sort of cultural impact is definitely flowing through into the enterprise, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's only going to get more critical, and this digital native mentality is going to become more pervasive, both I think demographically in terms of going up the chain into the later adopters, the folks that might have given birth to us, but also in terms of its breadth of capabilities, right? I mean, one of the interesting things that I find in our business at Software AG is when you look at the IoT business, you and I have a strong integration background,
Yeah.
but when you start to look at some of the work we've done with smart cities, especially around the globe, Here in the United States, it's a concept, it's an idea, and you can grasp it intellectually. But some of the new age developing cities of the world in which we're powering from an IoT standpoint are taking this to the nth degree with completely paperless cities and paperless interactions with their citizens, to the point where all of their citizen service delivery is going to become digital at some point, and or be dependent on a digital service, whether it be something as simple as scheduling to maybe quality or safety type of measures, and even looking at the health side. So as I think the public sector begins to adopt the the experience economy, and adapt it to the citizenry, it's going to become really interesting as to how this world of living connections begins to breathe all in unison.
Yeah. If we take it like super practical for a second and look at the importance of the signals and success metrics associated now, what does that actually mean for people out there working in IT about maximizing the full potential of your technology? It obviously means you need to start looking at different kinds of success metrics and different kinds of signals about whether you're on the right track. And just, quickly as a segue into my kind of past in integration, I remember back in the day, in the earlier days of integration, the whole thing was very close, like I said before, to infrastructure. We were doing super critical stuff, connecting a whole enterprise together. But it was almost a foreshadowing, actually, that the only thing that the executives or the decision makers and sponsors on my projects were interested in was not that we did this cool thing that connected it. They of course cared if that went down, by the way. So if the bank transactions go down, then they care.
Yeah.
But when they walk past my desk and they're like, they'd always say, "Hey Andrew, show me the cool, little dashboard or the cool little thing that's bouncing around," because that was the way they could humanize that super technical thing that was going on and bring it to life, right? So, I mean, what else do you think these days is important in terms of success metrics and signals you're on the right track with technology?
Yeah, it's the question of the day, especially with more kind of pioneering or frontier type technology like IoT, for instance, at least in my experience here at Software AG, because I also come from the integration world, and eh, gone are the days where you could satisfy a customer's curiosity around success by saying, "There's a dashboard in the product that shows you your integration transactions on
Yeah.
an hourly or on a per second basis, and therefore you can
Or
see."
like, look how fast mine is. Or
Exactly. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's at this point again. There's an expectation that I think we take for granted sometimes in terms of, the performance that we can achieve as technology vendors, and often people we wear it with pride, and often people say, "Well, of course it should work." I mean, it's the same as if I buy a tissue. If I blow my nose and the tissue breaks, the tissue sucked, right?
yeah,
Um, but I find that the in product analytics are nowhere near enough anymore, and I don't think that every technology vendor like us or our contemporaries can just become outright analytics vendors, right? Because the content, or the metrics that you're trying to derive around success of the technology that's powering this experience economy is somewhat individual to the use case and the customer, or
yeah,
the partner in our case. So I think it's a healthy balance of assessing, both quantitatively, what data am I collecting and what tools do I have to make sense of that data, and looking at your analytics strategy more cohesively, but also looking from an observation standpoint as to just what's the cultural shift or the behavioral shift within the target demographic of some of the technology solutions that you're delivering, right? I
hmm
mean, I think we especially as a technology industry become so focused on, I want a dashboard or a metric that can prove I was right. In fact, we lose sometimes the humanity of, how is people's behavior changing, right? We talk about like your son, for instance,
yeah,
having certain expectations around digital services that'll be different than ours, that are different than our parents. We see that anecdotally, but it's because we observe. And often I find in our customer base that observation aspect is somewhat lacking. I wonder if there'll be some kind of a behavioral component to this over time, right? Because that often I think is where you really codify or prove out success.
yeah. Do you think that translates a little bit too as well into the way that we would evaluate vendors now in this whole experience economy. I mean, we're obviously kind of on the other end of this. We certainly see some of the changes of the way that companies are evaluating us, right? It's a lot more about things about being in it together, assessing things like risk. Do you have things like a customer success team? There's a whole bunch of things that's changing in regards to evaluating vendors as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, vendor evaluation, as I kind of alluded to in my last point, vendors or customers that I interact with, they don't necessarily just want to know that you can tick the boxes in terms of proving success. Often, we, especially as a platform technology vendor, and I know a lot of other platform technology vendors out there would probably feel the same. When you go into a sales cycle now, or you go to meet with a prospect or potential customer, they're presenting to you a big idea. I've never in my career seen so much of a need for NDAs and confidentiality around
Yeah,
just interacting with people I don't know yet, right? That we don't even have a business relationship. But it's because of the need to build on big ideas to remain competitive.
yeah,
It sounds cliche, but it's true.
it's
You and I
definitely
see it
true.
on a daily basis. So
I mean,
when
but just to dive into that for a
sure,
second, right? You're not you're saying that it's not anymore about saying, well, okay, there's this market called. I mean, we're so biased towards integration here, but in the old school days, there's this market for ESB. I need an ESB. Let's put out an RFP for an ESB
right,
and evaluate a vendor. But
right.
that's not what we're seeing now, right? What we're seeing now is a manufacturer coming to us and saying, I need to transform my business from selling products that I manufacture to a services business, and I want to enable that in various different ways. And so that's when you talk about the NDAs and the bigger ideas and the bigger risk and the bigger picture that's going on with technology solutions now, right?
Yeah, I mean, and that's exactly the point. I think the word is risk, right? Because with a big idea comes big risk, and these transformations we often market as digital disruption and transformation, like it's
The
like
buzzword bingo.
exactly, but also like it's a roadmap that's defined, and we just have to deliver on it. And in fact, we are truly building the airplane in mid-flight with our customers. What I find to be most interesting, both in field roles, sales roles that I've held in my past, as well as product management and now product marketing, no matter what, and probably most surprisingly in sales, when I go out to customers, I have to help them to build out that roadmap just like I'm a part of their team.
Hmm.
I'm probably lucky I have some product management experience behind me to help them do that. But
Yeah.
I guess my point is, if to go back to your question, Andrew, if I'm looking for a vendor or a partner in this journey, I need to know that they're going to allow me to spread the risk and share the risk with them. But I in return am willing to open up and share that, share my fears, share my needs, and hopefully get their input to solve the problem together. I've got the business context, they've got the technology context, but we have to do that in a way that isn't just professional services. You can get consulting hours for $200 a pop and solve it. It's more than that. It's a true relationship, and it's a partnership that has to work in order to be successful for both parties.
Yeah. I think I would maybe only add one more thing in terms of the trend that we certainly both see in the way vendors are evaluated. Really, I think in any technology space is that the ones that seem to be going growth crazy at the moment and the ones that are successful, the pattern seems to be that they've taken some element of technology and brought it closer to a certain group of personas or lowered the barrier of entry to that in some dramatic way, whether it's IoT, being able to
Yeah.
set up a device by yourself, or analytics, self-service analytics. We have that with some of our products. Integration. You no longer want to have to be a computer science graduate to be able to do integration, right? That's your whole background from the company that we brought you into the Software AG family from. So I think that the importance of evaluating vendors on their ability to go straight towards a business or some kind of persona is also a big trend at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I
Yeah.
mean, it goes to enabling everyone. Absolutely.
So maybe to wrap it up here, once again to kind of keep it practical for the podcast, what about some advice on building business cases for technology solutions? Now we've spoken about a bunch of the macro changes. What could we talk about there in terms of advice on building business cases?
Well, yeah, I mean, let's build on what we've said so far in this conversation, right? So, One thing is certain, gone are the days where we as a vendor can show up.
By the way, it's super hilarious right now, and I love doing this podcast format so we can be real. I hope the microphones are actually picking this up.
The dial tone.
There's a fax machine going off in the background here, so I can't believe people are still using a fax while we're
It's not
talking
even
about
Throwback
the
Thursday, so
experience economy.
it's not a millennial playing on Instagram. It's an actual
Yeah.
fax machine.
Okay.
Yeah. um, but yeah, I think building on what I was saying in the past, I think when it comes to building the business case, gone are the days where we as a vendor can walk in and expect to kind of whiteboard out a grandiose vision and then hand over an order form and say, please sign on the line. We'll make this work together. It's become a lot more iterative and milestone based in terms of success. I think the first point that anyone has to consider is, what's going to be your proof point to actually build the business case, right? As you know, Andrew, I also lead our developer marketing efforts,
Yeah.
and one of the fundamental shifts that I recommended in how we market to developers was to say that before we ever have a developer engage in a sales cycle with us, they may have built out a fully functioning POC that could actually be much more than a Hello World app. I mean, it could be something in production that could power a small business process for their company, right?
Yeah.
And so we've got to acknowledge that that's going to be the way that we build our relationships with customers going forward. And to the customers out there, or prospective customers, you need to assess your vendors that way and make sure that they understand that your business is going to be earned based on this kind of iterative delivery approach and this iterative success based approach. So I think that it's wise that you build out kind of a milestone based, delivery based roadmap as part of your business case, and then let the success, the measurement of those milestones, coupled with hopefully a smaller commercial commitment, do the selling for you, and then
Exactly.
focus on kind of build and scale, build and scale, build and scale in that innovation model. So I've seen that work really well, especially when it comes to a lot of the new age consumer experiences that we're powering.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably the most relevant business unit for us is our IoT one in terms of those styles of business cases that we see, where customers are not building this ginormous commercially focused business case that hopefully pays off in the future. The horizons are much closer. Do something, show the success, make the vendor, which in our case is generally us, also come along with you on that journey and open up towards success together along those milestones as you put them along the way, right? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. The only other thing I'd say, Andrew, especially because we are talking more about kind of the human element and the experience based economy and technology based experiences, I find that we often get hung up on whether or not we're working with the business unit or IT,
Mm-hmm.
or technical folks or business folks, and sometimes we'll even look at do the technical folks report to the business folks? Okay, then it's all settled, right?
Yeah.
But in fact, it really matters in more the execution phase of a lot of these projects that there is business representation, even if they struggle to understand the technical concepts. That will come with time, just like we would as technologists struggle to understand the business concepts. But when you're building the business case, let me underscore the word business. Having the business acumen and the business subject matter expertise present throughout that POC or milestone based roadmap, as I called it, is super important. And I find that often, there's still a bit of a gap in terms of the business folks saying this is what we need to transform our business, and then technologists just go off and build it. When in fact, business folks are going to really have to take an active role in the business case throughout in order to make sure it's successful. Otherwise, you may hit on all the technical milestones, but still fail in the business case.
All right. Well, cool. This was a nice little podcast.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for joining me here in Santa Clara in our office here at Software AG.
Great to be here.
Thanks for our audience for listening on. I hope they're enjoying the rest of the Freshworks event right now.
Yeah,
And we'll catch everybody sometime soon.
absolutely. Thanks, Andrew.